When people hear the word prenup, something tightens in the chest. It feels cold. It feels legal. It feels like a shadow cast over what is supposed to be the brightest promise two people can make to each other. Marriage, we are told, is about love, faith, trust. The idea that two people step forward, hand in hand, believing not just in who they are today, but who they will become together. So when the topic of a prenuptial agreement enters the room, it often feels like someone just asked an uncomfortable question at a beautiful dinner table. Why would you plan for the end before the beginning? Why talk about division while pledging unity? Why prepare for failure while promising forever? These are not foolish questions. They come from the heart. They come from hope. They come from a longing for romance that believes love should be enough. But what if the conversation around prenups has been framed all wrong? What if the real question is not whether prenups are unromantic, but whether honesty, foresight, and responsibility are somehow less loving than fantasy? Because marriage is not just poetry. It is not just vows whispered through tears. It is also life, real life, messy life, life that changes people, circumstances, priorities, and even identities. Love does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in time, and time is the one thing no vow can freeze. When two people fall in love, they are not static beings. They are evolving stories. The person you marry at 30 will not be the same person at 50. Not because love failed, but because growth happened. Dreams shift. Careers rise or fall. Health changes. Children arrive, or do not. Money flows in different directions. Power dynamics move in ways no one predicts. None of this means marriage is fragile. It means marriage is alive. And anything alive requires care, structure, and sometimes difficult conversations to survive. Romance tells us that love conquers all. Reality teaches us that love needs support. A prenup, at its best, is not a prediction of divorce. It is a conversation about values. It asks questions most couples never slow down enough to ask before saying I do. What do we believe is fair? What does security mean to each of us? How do we protect one another if life goes off script? How do we make sure neither of us is left powerless if things change? These are not cold questions. They are deeply human ones. The tragedy is not that couples talk about prenups. The tragedy is that so many couples do not talk about anything difficult at all until it is too late. Money is one of the leading causes of conflict in marriage. Not because money is evil, but because it represents power, freedom, fear, and safety all at once. Ignoring that reality does not make it disappear. It simply delays the reckoning. A prenup forces clarity. And clarity, while uncomfortable, can be an act of love. Because love is not just about how you feel when things are good. Love is about how you protect each other when things are hard. Consider this. If you buy a house, you insure it. Not because you expect it to burn down, but because you understand the value of what you are protecting. If you drive a car, you wear a seatbelt. Not because you plan to crash, but because you respect the unpredictability of the road. We do not call these precautions unromantic. We call them responsible. Why, then, do we treat marriage as the one area of life where planning is seen as pessimism? Perhaps because we confuse love with denial. We want to believe that if love is strong enough, nothing bad will happen. But love is not a shield against reality. It is a commitment to face reality together. A prenup, when approached with mutual respect, is not about preparing to walk away. It is about agreeing on how to stand with dignity no matter what happens. It says, I love you enough to be honest. I respect you enough to be fair. I trust you enough to have this conversation now, while we still adore each other, rather than later, when we might be hurting. That is not unromantic. That is courageous. Of course, prenups can be used badly. They can be weapons. They can be one-sided. They can be demanded without empathy, without discussion, without care. But that is not a failure of the prenup. That is a failure of communication. Anything built without love can become cruel. Anything built with love can become protective. A healthy prenup is not sprung on someone like a test of loyalty. It is not an ultimatum. It is a collaboration. It says, let's design this partnership intentionally. Because marriage is not just about merging hearts. It is about merging lives. And lives come with history, debt, assets, children from previous relationships, businesses, family obligations, dreams that existed long before the relationship began. Ignoring those realities does not make the marriage purer. It makes it more fragile. There is a strange myth that true love requires blind faith. But love does not ask us to be blind. It asks us to be brave. Brave enough to talk about money without shame. Brave enough to admit fear without guilt. Brave enough to say, I want to protect you and myself. A prenup can be an act of mutual protection. For the partner who earns less, it can guarantee security. For the partner who earns more, it can offer peace of mind. For both, it can create boundaries that prevent resentment from growing silently over years. Resentment is rarely loud at first. It whispers. It accumulates. It grows in the spaces where expectations were never discussed. A prenup forces expectations into the open. And when expectations are spoken, they can be negotiated. When they remain unspoken, they become landmines. Romance thrives on honesty, not illusion. Think about the vows themselves. We promise to love in sickness and in health. For richer or poorer. For better or worse. Those vows acknowledge hardship. They do not deny it. A prenup is simply another way of acknowledging that life is unpredictable, and that love deserves structure strong enough to withstand that unpredictability. There is something deeply romantic about choosing transparency over fantasy. About saying, I want you, fully informed. About saying, I want us to be partners, not adversaries, even if our path ever forks. Because here is the uncomfortable truth no fairy tale tells us. Sometimes marriages end. Not always because someone failed. Not always because love was fake. Sometimes because people grow in different directions. When that happens, the question becomes not who is to blame, but how much damage is done in the process. A thoughtful prenup can reduce that damage. It can preserve respect. It can allow two people who once loved each other deeply to part without destroying each other financially or emotionally. There is dignity in that. And dignity is not the enemy of romance. We must also confront the cultural pressure that tells us love should require sacrifice without limits. That if you truly love someone, you should give everything without question. But healthy love is not self-erasure. It is mutual empowerment. A prenup, done right, says, your well-being matters. My well-being matters. Our future matters. It refuses to romanticize imbalance. It refuses to pretend that love alone will solve structural inequality. Instead, it asks how we can build fairness into the foundation. That is not cold. That is thoughtful. Some people fear that bringing up a prenup signals doubt. But doubt is not the same as realism. You can believe in forever. And still plan responsibly. You can be hopeful without being naive. In fact, hope is strongest when it is grounded. The most resilient marriages are not the ones that assume nothing will go wrong. They are the ones that know challenges will come and choose to face them together. A prenup can be part of that facing. It can be the first major test of how a couple navigates discomfort as a team. Do we listen to each other? Do we compromise? Do we care about fairness? Do we prioritize mutual understanding over winning? Those skills matter far more to marital success than whether a document exists. If a conversation about a prenup feels impossible, that is not a sign that the prenup is wrong. It may be a sign that deeper communication work is needed. Marriage magnifies everything. Strengths become strengths. Weaknesses become pressure points. Avoiding hard conversations does not make them disappear. It simply postpones their impact. There is also a generational shift happening. People are marrying later. They have established careers. They bring more complex financial histories into relationships. Expecting everyone to pretend those histories do not matter is unrealistic. Love does not ask us to erase our past. It asks us to integrate it wisely. A prenup can honor what each person has built while still committing to what they will build together. It draws a line between protection and partnership. And that line, when drawn together, can actually reduce fear. Fear thrives in ambiguity. Security grows in clarity. When both partners know where they stand, they can relax into the relationship more fully. Because love flourishes when people feel safe. Safe to be vulnerable. Safe to be honest. Safe to grow. The irony is that what many people fear will make marriage feel transactional can actually make it feel more intentional. Because intention is attractive. Intention says, I am choosing you with my eyes open. Not because I am swept away, but because I am committed. That kind of choice is powerful. So are prenups unromantic? If romance is defined as fantasy, then perhaps they are. But if romance is defined as choosing someone fully, truthfully, and responsibly, then a prenup can be one of the most romantic acts of all. It says, I believe in us enough to plan. I respect you enough to be fair. I value our love enough to protect it from unnecessary harm. That is not the absence of love. That is love grown up. Marriage is not sustained by the absence of difficulty. It is sustained by how two people face difficulty together. A prenup is not a verdict on the future. It is a mirror reflecting how a couple communicates in the present. And perhaps that is its greatest gift. It reveals whether love is built on avoidance or understanding, on fear or trust, on illusion or intention. Because at the end of the day, the most romantic promise is not that nothing will ever change. It is that no matter what changes, we will face it with honesty, dignity, and care. That is not unromantic. That is real love.